Hello, this is the Progressive Cynic, and in this video I will be discussing John Kerry and Rand Paul's argument in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Now, a few days ago, John Kerry and Rand Paul got into a fight over whether or not the down vote in the Foreign Relations Committee would result in the president simply declaring that we would be going into Syria. Now, Kerry said that, yes, they would listen to what the legislature said, but they would not rule out the possibility of a strike, even if the legislature no-goed it. Rand Paul, rightly, was very upset about that, and he actually had some very good comments on that. I'll be reading one right now. This is just an excerpt, as this discussion was much longer, but I believe this sums up the gist of the argument that Paul was making. James Madison was very explicit when he wrote the Federalist Papers. He wrote that the Constitution supposes that history demonstrates that the executive branch is the branch most likely to go to war, and therefore the Constitution vested that power on the Congress. It's explicit and runs throughout all of Madison's writings. This power is a congressional power and is not an executive power. If we do not say that the Constitution applies, if we do not say explicitly that we will abide by this vote, you're making a joke of us. You're making us into theater. And so we play constitutional theater for the president. If this is real, you will abide by the verdict of the Congress. Mind you, agreeing with Rand Paul most of the time gives me a headache. But on some issues, he is actually very good. This is one of them. It's ridiculous for the executive branch to go to the legislative branch and say, okay, we want you to agree with us that we need to have a war, do a full vote, and then once the vote comes down, completely disregard the effects of the answer that comes out of the legislature and say, okay, we're going to go on our own and declare war. It is constitutional theater. I mean, you can make some really convoluted argument that the War Powers Act, it allows some sort of intervention in Syria, but in no way does that justify just completely trampling over the legislative branch. I mean, if you go to the legislative branch and you say, vote on something, you don't just get to turn around and completely override their opinions if they don't come back with the answer you want. If you want someone to rubber stamp your approvals, don't go to a co-equal branch of government, because if they disagree with you, you have problems. Now, honestly, if Obama tries this, and if he decides to bring the United States into Syria, if the legislature denies him the ability to, which it looks increasingly likely that they will, it is probably an impeachable offense. I mean, really, even if you support it, it's the law. You can't overreach in that way if you're the executive. I mean, if a Republican did it, I would be up in arms. If Obama does it, I'm still going to be up in arms, because anyone who's not a pure partisan understands we cannot change the rule of law depending on who is in the presidency and whether or not you support them. I mean, hey, in this case, I also am standing with Rand Paul. I'm referring to, of course, the drone and pot legalizations as the other two cases where I find him to be actually coherent rather than absolutely off-the-wall crazy. Really, we need to demand that this sort of executive overreach does not continue. This is the kind of shit I would expect Bush to pull. But Obama should know better, if only because we've seen the results of this kind of hasty, ill-conceived, extra-legal involvement in the Middle East. I mean, we don't want another Iraq. We can't afford it, and we can't afford the possible damage it will do to our troops. Thank you. This has been the Progressive Cynic.